Hilda, Chapter 3, and When You Lose, Part 2. The next morning, I was a bundle of nerves as I walked to the bakery. Anna was by my side, her presence a comfort, yet I could feel the weight of what we were about to do. As we approached the bakery, the familiar scent of fresh bread wafted through the air, mingling with the chill of the winter morning. I caught sight of the baker, a stout man with a mustache, arranging loaves on the shelves. My stomach twisted with anticipation. "Ready?" Anna whispered, glancing around for any sign of trouble. I took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." We had printed enough leaflets to seep into the backs of customers without raising suspicion. As we entered, the bell above the door jingled and the warmth enveloped us. I spotted a few patrons huddled by the counter, deep in conversations. The baker turned to greet us. "Good morning, Gus. What can I get for you?" he said, wiping his hands on his apron. "Just a loaf of bread, please," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. While he turned to slice the bread, Anna suddenly shifted her back, revealing the leaflets tucked inside. She nodded at me, and I knew it was time to act. "Could we help you with something?" Anna asked, her eyes darting toward the stack of bags. "Not at the moment," the barker replied, focusing on his work. I exchanged a glance with Anna, and we both leaned toward the counter. "Maybe we could help you arrange these," I offered, trying to sound casual. The baker chuckled. "Sure, why not? Just don't knock anything over." As we began arranging the bags, I felt the weight of the leaflets pressing against my palm. I waited for the right moment, and as he turned to grab more loaves, I slipped a handful of flyers into a few bags. My heart raced as I completed the task, hoping no one had noticed. "Thank you," Anna said, a little too loudly. "We'll take the bread now." The baker handed over the loaf, oblivious to what we had done. As we left, I felt a surge of relief mixed with exhilaration. Later that week, we gathered in the same on-ground meeting spot. Each was buzzing with the adrenaline coming from successful mission. Paul was updating the group on the impact of our leaflets. "The response has been better than we expected. All of you, Anna and Hilda, Greta and Jack, all of you were amazing," he said, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "People are starting to talk." Just then, Greta stood up, "And we need to step it up. I've been thinking we should create a more significant distraction to draw attention away from our activities." I leaned in, intrigued. "What did you have in mind?" "I was thinking about staging a small protest outside one of the local government buildings. Something simple, but loud enough to draw a crowd," Greta suggested, her eyes shining with determination. Paul nodded, clearly impressed. "That's bold, but we need to ensure we have enough people and a way to escape if things go south. What do you all think?" The group murmured in agreement, some exchanging glances filled with concern. It was a risk, but we all knew we needed to take a stand. "I'm in," I said, feeling the energy in the room. "We can't let fear stop us from fighting back." Anna chimed in. "I help organize. We can spread the word discreetly and gather people without drawing attention." As we began planning, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of purpose. For the first time since the war began, we were actively pushing back against the regime. The stakes were higher, but so was our resolve. On the day of the protest, the air was thick with tension. We had gathered early in the morning, our group larger than expected. The plan was to chant slogans and distribute leaflets, drawing the attention of bystanders without being too conspicuous. As we gathered, I caught sight of familiar faces, including a few brave souls from our schools. The presence reminded me that we weren't alone in this fight. Paul rallied us together, a determined fire in his eyes. "Remember, we stay calm and collected. If things start to go wrong, we disband the group at Wilhelm's place. We must protect ourselves above all." As we marched toward the government building, my heart pounded with both fear and excitement. People began to notice us, their curiosity piqued. We chanted slogans, demanding freedom and justice, our voices blending into a powerful chorus. Just then, I spotted a few uniformed officers approaching, their expressions stern. My heart dropped as they moved closer, studying the scene. Stick to the plan, Anna whispered beside me, her eyes wide with concern. But as the officers drew nearer, I felt the atmosphere shift. They began to shout commands, ordering us to disperse. Panic surged through the crowd as people started to scatter. Go, go, Paul shouted, urging us to break apart. I grabbed Anna's hand and we bolted in the opposite direction, the sound of chaos ringing in our ears. Once we reached safety of an ally, we leaned against the wall, gasping for breath. My mind raced with events that had just unfolded. We had pushed boundaries, but at what cost? Did we get caught? Anna asked, her voice trembling. No, I think we made it out, I replied, trying to steady my racing heart. But we need to lay low for a while. The authorities will be on high alert. As we caught our breath, I couldn't shake the feeling of exhilaration mixed with dread. We had taken a stand, and for the first time, I felt like we were truly making a difference. But I also knew that the risks we faced were growing with each passing day. Let's meet at Wilhelm's later, I suggested. We need to regroup and figure out our next steps. As we slipped away from the alley, the weight of our mission pressed on my shoulders, but there was also a flicker of hope. We were part of something bigger than ourselves, a movement that could change the course of history. After everything, when I went back home, it was almost evening. I opened the door quietly, hoping to sleep in unnoticed, but my mother was already standing there, arms crossed, her eyes sharp like daggers. Where have you been? She asked, her voice low but tied with anger. Outside, I said quickly, trying to keep my tone light. Her face darkened as she took a step closer. Outside where? Just around with some friends, I replied, shifting my weight. Friends? She echoed, her voice rising. Miss Muller saw you, Hilda. She saw you during the protest. My heart sank, but I forced myself to stay calm. She must be mistaken. I wasn't at any protest. Don't lie to me, she snapped, slamming her hand down on the table. She saw you with her own eyes standing among the traitors. I wasn't, I insisted, feeling the heart race in my chest. I was just out walking around. I wasn't involved in anything. Do you think I'm stupid? She shouted, her face flushed with anger. Do you think I don't know what's going on? You were seen, Hilda, protesting. You've lost your mind. If I tell your father about this, I cut her off, trying to remain calm. You do not have to tell him anything because I wasn't there. Miss Muller must have mistaken someone else for me. Her voice grew louder, more panicked. Don't you lie to me, Hilda. Don't you dare. You know the kind of trouble this can bring to us, to your father. I wasn't at a protest, I shouted back, louder than I intended. I could feel the tension in my body, my fists clenched at my sides. People are being arrested for this, she screamed, her voice trembling with fear. This isn't some game, Hilda. You're playing with fire, with our lives. I didn't do anything, I said again, though the words felt weaker this time. She let out a bitter laugh. Oh, so Miss Muller is just blind, is she? Seeing things now? Hilda, if the authorities come knocking on our door because of you, it won't just be you who pays the price. We all will. Your father. She paused and lowered her voice, her words dripping with a dark warning. If I tell your father he'll chop your head off, Hilda, you know that, don't you? I looked away, unable to meet her eyes. I wasn't at the protest, I murmured. I mumbled, but it sounded like a weak defense even to me. She leaned in closer, her voice softer now, but the threat clear. Don't you dare lie to me again, Hilda. Don't. If this happens again, if I even hear a whisper of you being near something like that, I will tell your father and he'll make sure you regret it. Do you understand? There was a long, tense silence. My mind raced, but I didn't have the energy to argue anymore. I felt like I was suffocating. Finally, I muttered, I know. The last word hung in the air, heavy with defiance and dread. My mother's chase My mother's chest heaved. My mother's chest heaved with anger, her face reddening as she stared at me like I was some stranger in her house. I could see the frustration in her eyes, the fear twisting into something more venomous. You dare to defy this family? She spat, her voice shaking. You think you can just walk around with those traitors and go against everything we stand for? Against everything the FOA stands for? Do you even realize what you're doing? I opened my mouth to respond, but she cut me off, her voice rising into a full scream. He is the only reason we have a future. He is the one keeping this country from crumbling. And you? Her voice cracked with rage. You're throwing it all away. You don't deserve to stay alive if you don't agree with that. You hear me? You don't deserve to live in this house if you stand against him. I flinched I flinched as she slammed her hand on the wall beside me, her whole body shaking. People like you are a disgrace. You spit on everything the fool has built. Your father fights every day for this country, for you, and this is how you repay him? With disloyalty? By betraying him? Betraying us all? I didn't betray anyone, I said, barely above a whisper, but it was drowned out by her screaming. Barely above a whisper, but it was I didn't betray anyone, I said, barely above a whisper, but it was drowned out by her screaming. You did. You don't believe in what he's doing. You did. You don't believe in what he's doing. You don't respect him. And if you don't respect the fool, if you don't agree with everything he's done for us, you don't deserve to be called German. You don't deserve to stay under this roof. Her voice cracked with hatred as she pointed to the door. I could feel my whole body trembling, my throat tight, but I stood there, staring at the floor, trying to keep myself together. You don't understand anything, Hilda, she hissed. You have no idea what's at stake. If anyone else finds out about your involvement, you're not just putting yourself at risk, you're putting your whole family in danger. And for what? For some petty rebellion? Some stupid protest? I'm not involved in anything like that. I tried again, my voice weak. You're lying, she screamed, and it felt like the walls were closing in. I saw the look in your eyes, the way you talk. You don't believe in him anymore, and people like you don't deserve to be alive if you stand against the fool. Her words cut like a knife, and my throat tightened with emotion. I wanted to shout back, to defend myself, to tell her that she didn't know anything about me or what I believed, but I couldn't. I stormed to the door, my hands shaking as I grabbed the handle. My mother's voice pierced through the tension behind me. "Where are you going?" she screamed, her voice desperate and furious. Without turning back, I threw the door open, my own voice coming out louder than I expected. "Somewhere that I deserve to stay alive." The words hung in the air for a split second, cutting through the room like a knife, and then I slammed the door behind me, the sharp crack echoing down the street as I stepped out into the cold. I cried the entire way to Power's house. The tears wouldn't stop, burning hot against my cold cheeks. My sobs echoed through the empty streets, but I didn't care who heard me. By the time I reached the door, my breath was racked, and I could barely see, my vision blurred by the relentless stream of tears. I lifted my hand to knock, but my fingers trembled so much it barely made a sound. I stood there helpless, barely able to focus on anything but the overwhelming weight of it all. Then she opened the door, her eyes widening as she saw me standing there, broken. Before she could say a word, I ran into her arms, collapsing into the hug. I buried my face in her shoulder, my tears soaking into her clothes as she wrapped her arms around me tightly, without hesitation. For a moment, the world outside didn't exist. It was just me and her, and the warmth of that embrace that held everything together. I held her, clutching her like she was the only thing tethering me to the ground. What else could I have needed? In that moment, it wasn't just words, it wasn't explanations, just the quiet, steady comfort of someone who didn't ask questions, who didn't judge. All I needed were two arms strong enough to hold me, to wrap around me and make the world feel a little less terrifying. I needed someone who would listen without demanding answers, someone who would protect the tears that fell freely, soaking into the safety of her embrace. It felt like I could fall apart, and she would still be there, holding me together in the quiet strength of the moment. At her home, she sat in front of me, her eyes searching mine, waiting for an explanation. She had no idea what was wrong, and I didn't know where to start. My heart pounded in my chest, the words heavy on my tongue. Finally, I blurted out, "I lied about Hans. He is dead. He didn't come back with Carl and my dad." Her face froze, the weight of what I had said sinking in. She blinked as if trying to process the truth, and then her expression softened. In a quiet, almost disbelieving voice, she whispered, "I'm sorry." Her words, though simple, felt like they carried the weight of the world. It was the first time someone had acknowledged my pain, and it was enough to unravel me further. I slowly whispered, "What am I even fighting for, teacher?" She sat still, her eyes never leaving mine, listening in a way that made the silence between my words feel safe. "I don't know anything," I continued, my voice trembling. "You were right. I'm too young. I'm too small for all this hatred. Too small to fix some minds that see murder as normal." My words hung in the air, the weight of them pressing down on my chest. I felt like a child lost in a storm that was far too big for me to control. I thought I could do something, be something, but it's all just too much. I felt her hand gently reaching for mine, her fingers warm and steady. It was the kind of touch that anchored me, kept me from drifting too far into the overwhelming storm of my thoughts. I kept thinking maybe if I fought hard enough, I could change something. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But now I don't even know if it matters. People are dying, teacher. People like Hans, and I'm here pretending like I can make a difference. My hand trembled in hers, and I couldn't stop the tears from rising again. What's the point if it just keeps getting worse? I continued, my voice cracking. Isn't it better to just give up? To die even? What's the point in fighting if nothing changes? She tightened her grip on my hand, her gaze soft but firm. "Hilda," she said quietly, "I know it feels like the weight of the world is crushing you, but I'm certain of one thing. You are stronger than this. You're stronger than you know." Her words were steady, unwavering. "You may feel small, but you've got a fire in you. That's something not everyone has." I burst into tears again, the sobs shaking my chest. "My mom's right," I cried, the words barely escaping through my broken voice. "If my dad finds about any of this, he'll kill me. He'll hand me in himself." Bauer's eyes widened, her face contouring with a mix of shock and anger. She leaned in closer, her voice urgent but gentle. "Hilda, listen to me," she said softly. "Your parents, they don't understand, but that doesn't mean they're right. You can't let the fear or hatred define who you are. You are not them." Her voice hung in the air like a lifeline I wanted to grab onto, but all I felt was the heaviness of my family's expectations. Her hand gently brushed across my hair, her touch soft, reassuring. "You're smart," she whispered, her voice steady. "You're beautiful, you're brave, and people might not see that, but I do." I stared into her eyes, feeling my heart race. There was something in the way she said it, something that reached into the deepest parts of me, parts I didn't even know existed. Those words, I had waited so long to hear them, to have someone see me, not for the mistakes I'd made, not for the family I came from, but for who I truly was. A part of me wanted to tell her that, to tell her how much her words meant, how much I had longed for someone to say them, but the words stuck in my throat, caught between fear and vulnerability. So I just looked at her, my silence filled with everything I couldn't say. She didn't push for more. Instead, she sat there, her hands still in my hair, her eyes locked on mine as if she understood all the unsaid things. Maybe she knew. Maybe she didn't need me to speak. Instead of saying anything, I just leaned forward and wrapped my arms around her. That became my language. Words felt useless, empty. I had come to hate them because no matter how much I spoke, they would never fully capture the hell we were living in. Words failed to describe the suffocating fear, the constant weight of death hovering over us all. Talking had lost its meaning in a world where nothing made sense anymore. With a hug, that was different. A hug could say everything I couldn't put into words. Each time I hugged her, she understood. It was like she could feel what I needed without me having to explain. Sometimes, when I was too far gone into my own despair, she'd notice something in my face, the way my eyes would shift or my shoulders would sink, and without a word, she'd pull me into her arms. Each hug carried its own meaning, its own weight. It was the only way I could communicate what was churning inside of me, the only thing that felt real in a world that had become a nightmare. There was one time in particular I hugged her and whispered, "Thank you for everything." But what I really meant, what those words were hiding, was that I wanted to go home that day and end it all. I wanted to disappear, to stop fighting, to escape the endless pain that consumed me. I didn't know if it was fortunate or unfortunate, but that same day the city was bombarded for the first time. Sirens wailed, explosions shook the ground, and chaos erupted around us. In the end, I didn't get the chance to go home and kill myself. The world was too busy falling apart. Looking back, I wondered if she knew, if she ever guessed that the hug I gave her that day was a silent cry for help, a plea to be saved from myself. But she never asked, she never pushed. She just held me, her arms a shield against the madness outside, as if she could keep me together when I was too shattered to do it on my own. And maybe that was enough.